Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm really excited to talk to you about this design topic, number parity in tabletop games. That may not sound all that exciting, but I think it's a really exciting topic because it delves into one thing that is, I think, generally found exciting, or at least I find it exciting in games, which is when there is a random element that I'm from a dice, so I'm rolling some dice and getting a number that I do or do not want, or I'm drawing a card and getting a card that I do or do not want. You can see that in a lot of our games. I find that exciting. However, the tricky thing with having dice or cards with random elements on them is that sometimes in games, certain numbers are just better than other numbers. And that can add to the excitement. If I'm trying to roll a 6 on this die and I roll that 6, that can be really exciting. And the uncertainty of whether or not I'll roll this 6 is exciting. However, it means that any other number other than 6, in that case, in this example, is less exciting. And it gets generally worse as you go down to lower numbers. Same can go for cards. If you have cards of different values, and I even kind of do this in one of my games, in Scythe, there are combat cards numbered 1 through 5. Drawing a 5 can be really exciting. Drawing a 1 can be less exciting. And so there's this excitement of getting a random element, but sometimes certain numbers are just strictly worse than others. And so the topic that I'm exploring today is number parity. Games in which random elements, random input, can still maintain that excitement, but can also offer different numbers can offer different benefits and different reasons that you might be excited about different numbers. Maybe not at all times, but sometimes. So let's jump right in and start talking about these games. So I have a bunch of games on this list. I'm kind of going to rattle off this list and go fairly quickly through them because I have a lot of examples. But I'm going to give you a lot of examples of games that I think do a good job of offering different purposes for different numbers for the purposes of number parity. Let's start with Bora Bora. Bora Bora is actually a game that I played very recently for the first time. It's a Stefan Feld game. Like several of his games, it uses dice. I think he's actually on this list several times. He might use dice in a lot of his games. But in Bora Bora, you'll roll, I believe, 3 dice at the beginning of each round, and you'll use those dice as kind of a worker placement throughout the round. Higher numbers of dice, so if you roll, I'll keep using these Rolling Realms dice as an example. If you roll a high number, it generally means that you get a stronger power as a result when you place that die. However, the one rule for placing dice on many of the different spots available on the board, especially if another die is there, is that your die cannot be higher. It actually must be lower, I believe. Lower than, or I don't think it's lower than or equal to. I believe it's lower than. Must be lower than any other dice that are there. So it creates this nice tension between players. If I roll at the beginning of the round, if I have, say, a 3, a 2, and a 1, all other players see this. And all of a sudden, they get kind of nervous about their high rolls because they know that if I put this 3 on an action that they really want to take with a 5 or a 6, they won't be able to. They just won't be allowed to do that. And so it creates a nice tension to the game, and it also gives me a little bit of power there. If I have a low roll, yes, I'm getting slightly lower benefits, but I might be completely blocking other players out of an action. So I think that's an interesting way of having number parity in games in Bora Bora. This list is alphabetical. I don't know if I mentioned that. Next up is Brian Boru. In Brian Boru, it is a trick-taking game where each card has different abilities on it on the top and the bottom. The top ability is if you actually win the trick. The bottom ability is if you lose, unless I've mixed those two up. But one of them is for if you win the trick. The other is if you lose the trick. And the numbers, I believe, are 1 through 21, somewhere around there, for each type of card, 3 different types of cards. And so if I win a trick with, say, a really high number, 20, then the benefit that I gain might actually end up being more of a cost. Some of those higher numbered cards have a little bit of a cost to it rather than a true benefit. Whereas the lower number cards, if you manage to win with one of them, you might get a really nice powerful benefit. So it balances the numbers with the cost/benefit of the powers on the cards themselves. You'll see that among several of the games on this list. In Cartographers, this was one that I debated putting on the list a little bit. This is a game that I have here. In Cartographers, because all players are sharing the random input here, but it is still a random input. At the beginning of each turn, you're going to reveal a random card. Let's see if I can find an example here as I'm doing this. You'll reveal a random card, and that card has a couple different options on it, typically. That one has the same option. Let's find one that has different options here for this example. Yeah, here's one. And the option is usually, so they're polyomino shapes that you need to draw on a map. And so this has two options here. And you get to decide between taking the bigger shape, which can sometimes help you with certain goals, where you might want to fill in a big area with forest, for example, here. So you might fill in that bigger shape on your map. Or you can choose a smaller shape, so bigger number, smaller number in polyomino form. But with a smaller number, you can kind of fit it in spaces that you wouldn't normally be able to fit it. So you might be able to achieve a very specific goal. And you often get an income benefit as well with it. So I like the idea of pairing bigger numbers take up more space for a polyomino game, but smaller numbers might come with an income benefit or a little bit more flexibility. Or you're able to fit into kind of smaller, more narrow gaps there. So I think that's a nice perk from this game, Cartographers. Now I have to put things back in the box. So yeah, that's Cartographers. The next one is another Steffenfeld game, that is the Castles of Burgundy. Dice are used in a lot of different ways in Castles of Burgundy on your turn. You have a lot of different options of how you use them. You're kind of drafting a die from the board, or you're rolling 2 dice, and then you're using those dice to draft tiles from the board and sometimes place those tiles on your map. And I think the neat thing about Castles of Burgundy is that it, with maybe a few rare exceptions, it doesn't really care about how high the number is. Rather, there are just simply places on your map that have different numbers. And so at certain times, circumstantially, you might need to expand into a green space that has a number 3 on it. And so you at that time will value the number 3 more than other dice that are out there. And also on the board, there are 6 different spots for tiles to be randomly placed at the beginning of the round. And so if you have, say, a number 2, or if you really want a tile that's in that number 2 area, at that given time, you value 2 over other numbers. So the size of the number doesn't really matter all that much at all. It's just specific numbers matter at specific times. In Cinderella's Dance, this is a little card game, looks like this, little card game here. This game does something really interesting in that the whole crux of the game is that you are given a hand of random cards that look like this, and you are trying to stay in the round, basically. The longer that you can stay in the round, the better. If you are the last player who can actually play a card, you win that round. And the way you do that is one player plays a card, say a player plays a 17. The next player must play one of the 3 cards that are higher than the 17, the next 3 sequential cards. If they cannot do that, they lose the round. And so in this game, numbers, again, similar to Castles of Burgundy in a way, numbers are highly circumstantial. Higher numbers are not necessarily better than lower numbers in any way. What matters is the sequence. Having kind of a wide range of numbers in your hand is what matters. And even though you have a random hand of cards, you are choosing, or sometimes choosing, when possible, you're choosing which card to play next. So someone plays that 17. Do I play, like in this case, I probably would play the 20 because I know that I have the 18 and 19 in hand, and those can play off the 16 if someone plays that, or even the 18 can play off the 15 if someone plays that. So having kind of giving players a reason to want a range of numbers, I think, is an interesting way of offering number parity in tabletop games. That's Cinderella's Dance. In Coimbra, I can't speak all that well of Coimbra. I haven't played it in a while, but it's a really smart Euro game, medium weight Euro game that uses dice. And from what I recall from it, the dice that you select give you a balance of choices between the range of choices that you can use with the dice versus the cost. Again, it's been a while since I played it, but I believe the costs are higher if you choose a higher die. But if you choose a higher die, you have a broader range of choices that you can choose from. In Conspiracy, which is a game that I've only played, I think, on Board Game Arena. Conspiracy is a really nice game set in the world of Abyss. It does something that a couple of these games do, which is higher number cards are better for points. They're more points, generally more points at the end of the game. However, lower number cards have abilities on them. I think particularly the ones in Conspiracy have abilities on them. So I think this is a great way of creating number parity, where if you have higher numbers are worth more for some specific purpose, whether it's points or power, but lower numbers have little abilities on them. So both can feel very good to take at different times. Higher numbers aren't strictly better than lower numbers because of that. That's Conspiracy. Next up, we have Dice Throne, a wonderful dice crafting game. I'm sorry, I was confused Dice Throne with Dice Forge. In Dice Throne, this is the Yahtzee-like dueling game where you represent a character, you have some special dice for that character, you're rolling those dice and potentially re-rolling up to 2 times to try to get the best, to activate one single ability. You're in the best in that circumstance. And in Dice Throne, higher numbers aren't strictly better because you're going after sets, you're going after straights, and you're going after combinations of icons in addition to the numbers because icons are paired with different numbers on the dice. I think having this idea of sets, straights, different combinations of numbers, making that matter more than how big the number is, and also pairing them with icons, I think that's a great way to have number parity in games. I actually have Dice Throne, the Marvel version. I should have pulled that out here. I do have one of my games, Euphoria. So Euphoria uses number parity in what I think is a somewhat unique way on the commodity areas. Let's see if we can find one that's easily seen on camera here. Oh yeah, here's one, the Cloud Mine. Cloud Mine right up top there. So in the Cloud Mine, if I put a worker here, workers are dice in Euphoria, if I put a number, say I put a 3 value worker here, I would gain 1 bliss, 1 resource, and I would move the Icarus allegiance track up 1 space, which is circumstantially good. If I am an Icarite, if I have an Icarite recruit in the game, that's good. If I don't, then I probably want to avoid that number and go for a higher number. And place, say, maybe a 6 here, a 5 or a 6, and gain a bliss and lose a knowledge. You want workers to have low knowledge in Euphoria. However, this commodity area, you can kind of pile on workers there. So if I put a 3 value worker there, the next player can also put a worker there. This can fit any number of workers. And it's the sum of all those workers that creates the value of what benefit you're going to gain. And as you get to the really high benefits, it can feel good because you're getting 2 bliss for a single die placement, but you also get a bad thing. So this is something that you'll see throughout this list and a few other places where a higher number actually gives you a penalty. If you have a higher number or a sum of a higher number in this case, whereas lower numbers give you circumstantially better benefits, but it might not always be a better benefit. It depends on your allegiance in this particular game. That's Euphoria. In Gloomhaven, lots of different numbers in Gloomhaven, a fairly mathy, tactical, cooperative game. In Gloomhaven, initiative is used in interesting ways. And as I'm saying this, initiative isn't, I guess it isn't completely random in Gloomhaven, but there is a randomness to the enemies, the AI's initiative. Again, not completely random, but there's a little bit of randomness to it. But what I like about the initiative system in Gloomhaven in terms of different numbers that come up, and I think this can pop up in other games with initiative too, is that you don't always value going first more than you value going last in Gloomhaven. Sometimes you want the enemy units to move first or act first, maybe get a little bit closer to you, and then you can act. But at other times you do want to act first, maybe try to kill an enemy or deal with an enemy in some way before they have the opportunity to move or attack you. So I like, if there's going to be a random initiative in a game, I like where players have that debate, that circumstantial debate of, do I want to go first or do I not want to go first, and how can I deal with the situation as best as possible based on that random element. In Gudetama, perhaps a much less known game than Gloomhaven, it's a game where you are playing cards from hands, trying to survive the hand, basically, go as long as possible, and so that you don't be the player to run out of hand, or to run out of all the cards and be unable to play. Because if you are the last player, then you will score points equal to your last card in hand. I hope I'm saying this correctly. It's a weird game, but in that way, the card that's remaining in your hand matter, card or cards, because the value of those cards are negative points. So if you end up at the end of the round with an 8 value card, that's 8 negative points. That's a lot. You'd rather end the round with, say, a 2 or a 3. So this would indicate that normally lower numbers are better than high numbers. But in Gudetama, the little twist there is that if I play a higher number and you can't play a number higher than that, you must play your lowest number in hand. So it kind of resets the path there. You play the lower number. Now we need to play on top of that number, and so this gives value to both types of numbers here. I can kind of force you to play a lower number by playing that high number. Higher numbers give you more the ability to play more cards, but they all are also worth more negative points at the end of the round. Let's talk about a game that I know much better than Gudetama, and that is Hanamikoji. In Hanamikoji, you are trying to win the influence of 7 different geisha using random hands of cards. So you have random hands of cards here. And the really cool thing here, I love this little trick I think that many games do, is that the number of this card, so this is an item that you use to influence a specific geisha, and there are 3 of this card in the deck, as indicated by this number, but 3 is also the number of points that geisha is worth at the end of the round if you have won their favor. And one of the win conditions is that you have, at least 10 or 11 points of geisha, 11 or more charm points. So these numbers go from 2 to 5. And so if the 5 value geisha, 5 value cards can seem a little bit better because you might have the potential of getting 5 points there. But because it's 5, the value is 5, that means there are also 5 cards in the deck. And so you have a little bit less control there over whether or not you will end up being the player to have more cards on that side of the table. So balancing the strength with the quantity of cards, I think Bonanza actually does this too. I just thought of Bonanza has that similar element where there are cards that they're plentiful in the deck, but they are harder in Bonanza to complete sets in that game because you have more of those cards. So yeah, that's Hanamikoji. Next up, we have Jekyll versus Hyde, a recent play that I really, really enjoyed. This is one that I might need to buy because I really enjoyed it. But this is a really clever twist. It's a 2-player trick-taking game where one player wants there to be balance. That player wants each player to take the same exact number of tricks, or as close as possible to the same number of tricks. The other player wants there to be as big of an imbalance as possible. So at the end of the round, they want one player to have won 5 tricks and the other player to only having won a few. There's a very specific number of tricks that you can win each round. I can't remember the exact number. But I think this is so clever that they have number parity in Jekyll versus Hyde by saying that it is not always good to win the tricks or win whatever you want. So they're saying high numbers are better. Sure, high numbers are better for winning tricks, but you don't always want to win tricks. I think that's such a clever way to get around number parity. Libertalia. Libertalia Winds of Galecrest here. This game offers all players the same random hand of cards. However, in this game, we offer numerical parity or number parity by saying that numbers matter in 2 different ways. When you play a card, say I play a 5 value card. Let's see if I can find a specific card here. I can't see it on the box, but yeah. So say I play the 10. The 10 is an explorer according to the back of the box. If I play the explorer card, 10 value card, I line it up in a row, and I can show you what that row looks like on the island here, based on from lowest number to highest number. And that means that from lowest to highest, we're going to activate each of their abilities. And so the lower the number, the sooner their daytime ability will trigger. So that's good. However, once you get to the end of the row and you get to the highest number, you'll go back down from right to left at that point, from highest number to lowest number, to select loot from the island on that day. So higher numbers are better for selecting loot, but lower numbers get to activate first, which may actually interact with the loot or with those higher number characters. So having kind of a balance there between activations, having 2-way activations in terms of numbers, I think that's a great innovation from Paolo Mori in Libertalia. Love Letter, the little Love Letter game. In Love Letter, it's another game, I've already kind of said this with one of the other games, but it balances more important and more rare abilities with lower value cards, whereas, let's make sure I get that right, because I believe the lower value cards, yeah, so like the 1 ring, I'm actually saying it the other way around. The 1 ring is the 0. You want the 1 ring card. Smog is very powerful. Smog is a 1. Actually, yeah. So in general, there are more of the Arkenstone is the number 8 here. There are more of the lower numbers, but the higher numbers get more powerful. Actually, as I'm saying this, I don't know if a Love Letter is that all that good of an example of a game that does number parity, but I feel like it does. I need to play it again to make sure. Maybe I'll bring it to game night tonight to see. But yeah, we'll leave that one for there. Let me know in the comments below if you can think of why the Hobbit Love Letter or any Love Letter has good number parity. Let's get back to games that I know a little bit better. Marco Polo. Marco Polo has so it's another dice worker placement game. There's a cost. So if someone else, similar to Bora Bora, there's a cost to using, or not a cost. Bora Bora, you're just blocked. But in Marco Polo, there's a cost to use a space that's occupied by another worker, and the cost is equal to the value on the die that you're placing. So in Marco Polo, you get better rewards with higher value dice, but you pay less to use a blocked action if you're placing a lower number. I think that's a nice innovation for number parity. Quantum. I think Quantum is a game with a fantastic example of number parity. It does something very unique in terms of games with combat, and that is that lower numbers win combat. However, higher numbers are equal to how far your ship can move. And so it's kind of saying, okay, if your ship is really slow, then it's slow because it's kind of big, it's well protected, it can fight well. But if it has a really high number, that means it can move farther. So if you have a 4 value ship out on the board, you can move really far. You can move away from other ships. You can dart around. You can move 4 spaces. But it's not very good if you get attacked. You want those lower numbers if you get attacked. It's very clear. It's very simple, but I love that element of Quantum. Rajas of the Ganges. This is a game where you use dice as resources in the game. Let me pull out the board real quick while I'm talking about Rajas, because it uses numbers in all sorts of ways throughout the game. So the dice over here, there's similar to a little bit Castles of Burgundy. Dice simply have different people associated with them. They can activate different abilities based on the die that you use over here. So one number isn't strictly better than the other. They're just a variety of abilities. Which ability do you want right now? That's the one that you're looking for in your die. There are some spaces where higher numbers might be slightly better, but really it's like kind of sets of numbers. They're looking for numbers that are different than each other, numbers that are the same as each other. If you're moving along this path here, you might want to move really far because that can get you towards stronger abilities. But if you do that, it's a one-way path. You can't go back if you do that. So you might want to go slower along this waterway, along the river, use lower numbers, or you can jump forward and use higher numbers. It uses numbers in such a wide variety of way. I really, really love that. Higher numbers are slightly better for buying tiles, but yeah, I think that's a fantastic example in Rajas of how there's number parity in terms of the random dice that you're... sometimes they're random, not always random. Sometimes they're random. In Raptor is a fantastic 2-player game. And in Raptor, the player who has the lowest card... So you'll choose one card to play and simultaneously reveal it in Raptor. The player who has the lowest card gets to use that card's ability. That's all they get to do, use the ability. While the player with the highest card of the 2 cards gets to use the difference as the number of their action. So if I play a number 2 value card and you play a 5, then I get a nice ability. I get the ability on the 2 card. But you get 5 minus 2, 3. You get 3 actions on that turn. So there's always this nice balance in Raptor. Do you play a really low number because you really want an ability right now, or do you play a high number because you want a lot of actions? Great decision space there in Raptor between high and low numbers. In Regicide, a very recent cooperative game that I've been playing, or recent for me, it's a cooperative game that you only uses a deck of cards. It does something that I think is really clever, which is that you're trying to kill the face cards in the game. And if you kill them precisely, then you get to much faster add those face cards to your own deck or to someone's deck who's playing cooperatively with you. So precision, I think precision is a way that a variety of numbers can be valued. Sometimes a higher number will be better if you need a higher number for that precise kill, but sometimes lower numbers will be better too. So I think precision is great. Also, precision when discarding in this game. You're going to be dealt damage by the face cards. And if I have all, say I have all 9s in the hand for some reason, but I'm only dealt 3 damage, I still have to discard a 9. So having those lower numbers for more precise discarding can be great in Regicide. And last, they do something clever in the rules where they say you can combine numbers if they are the same numbers and they add up to less than 10, or it's either less than or equal to 10. So if I have 2 4s in hand, I can add those 2 4s together, get both abilities from the cards. They act as an 8 since I'm adding 4 plus 4. but they don't let you do that above a certain number. And so essentially the game is saying, hey, like this is how we are valuing these lower numbers. You have the potential of adding them together. That's Regicide. In Role Player has a nice little twist on how numbers are used. It uses some element of precision. You're kind of placing dice on your little player mat here to complete your character's abilities. Oftentimes, higher numbers are better here, though, because you're trying to get more than a certain amount. But there is an element of precision here, too. There are certain ranges that you need to hit, and you can't go over those. If it says 16 to 17, you need either a sum of 16 or 17. So you need to be really precise there as you do it. Also, they work numbers into priority. So at the beginning of each round, the different dice that are rolled are assigned to a priority slot in ascending order. So with the lower numbers being the higher priority. And so if you choose a lower number that round, you will be the first to be able to buy one of the limited cards available in the market that round. So if you really want a specific card in the market, say there's like a certain armor set that you're going after, you might choose a lower number, get priority there to use to buy first, and then you have to place that lower number in your grid here, which may be better for precision. Or it might be a sacrifice you've made there. Maybe you really wanted a higher number, but you really wanted to buy that card more so. So balancing priority with power, I think, is a nice way that the games do this. In Rolling Realms, so we've made so many different promo realms, some of which you've seen, some of which you haven't seen yet in Rolling Realms. And in every one, we're asking how is there number parity here? So in Wingspan, for example, the Wingspan realm, you're trying to place numbers in each of these bird cards, complete the bird cards, so that you can have the sum of those numbers equal the sum on that card. So really, high numbers are necessary on this card. You want low numbers down here. In A Feast for Odin, one of our most recent promo realms, you're trying to fill in these islands with the shapes, and so you need at certain times very specific shapes. So the bigger numbers can cover up more spaces and gain more benefits, but to actually complete the islands, you might need these smaller, more precise numbers. And one more example here, in Tapestry. Tapestry is actually fairly similar to A Feast for Odin in that you need precision at times to fill in very specific spaces on this polyomino grid. Big numbers are generally better in Tapestry. Again, you're trying to fill in more spaces to complete the grid, but lower numbers are better at precision. You're going to be talking about precision a lot. I think precision is a great goal to look after when you're trying to have number parity. 3 more examples here. Rumble Nation. So Rumble Nation is an awesome, really, truly awesome game, combat interactive game, where you, at the beginning of your turn, you're rolling 3 dice, and you are choosing 2 of those dice to add together to determine which territory on the map, numbered between 2 and 12, you are going to interact with. And then the last number is how many tokens you're going to place on that territory. That number itself, you're either going to place 1, 2, or 3 tokens there. And all 3 of those options have different benefits, because you can kind of assert your control over that territory by placing more tokens there by using a high number. Or you can kind of stall and play back and hold back by placing fewer cubes there, so that you have more information at the end of the round based on how many different people are in different spots. If you're the last player left in the round, or in the game really, then you have more control there. And also the numbers on the board, having control of the 12 territory is really great, because you get more points from it. You get 12 points from controlling that territory. However, there's this cascading effect that I won't go into detail here in Rumble Nation, but basically you start by resolving the lower value territory. You start by resolving the number 2 territory. And the winner of that territory can spread out to other territories, other adjacent territories or touching territories where they have at least 1 cube. And so having control of those lower number territories, even though they're worth less, can be great, can create this wonderful cascading effect where you won the 2 and now you won the 3. Maybe you now won the 4. And so it can kind of build towards you being better at capturing those higher number territories. That's Rumble Nation. Space Base, I think, does something really clever. It's a little bit different than Rumble Nation, or kind of similar, in that in Space Base, one player is going to roll some dice, and all players are going to use those 2 dice. So you have 2 dice that are rolled, and you can choose to use those numbers either by adding them together. So this would be 2 and 3 would be a 5, and activating your 5 column of cards in Space Base, or you can separate them into using a 2 and a 3. I think this is a really, really clever way of offering number parity because you're not necessarily saying that one number is better than any other in the game. In fact, and I really messed up. I think the first time I played Space Base because I was so used to just automatically adding the numbers together and assuming that kind of 6, 7, 8 would be the most valuable numbers in the statistical curve of which numbers are more likely to show up more when you're rolling two numbers. But really, that curve isn't really there because you can separate those numbers whenever you want. So it's offering number parity by giving you flexibility as to whether or not you add together those numbers. And last, we have Wingspan. Here I have Wingspan Asia over here as the example for today. So in Wingspan, and there are many games that do this, but in Wingspan, you are getting random cards, random bird cards. At the beginning of the game, at certain times of the game where you're drawing from the top of the deck, and even just the cards that come up in the card row, the bird cards are random. They are balanced through a huge formula that Elizabeth Hargrave uses in terms of the value of the points and utility of the birds versus other aspects of the bird, their cost to play, their flexibility of where you can play them, how many eggs they can hold, all these different factors on the bird. So I think this is a great way that many games, Wingspan, Terraforming Mars, many games that use random cards balance kind of the cost to play with the strength of the benefit and the value, the points value on that card itself. So I think this is another great way if you have random cards, random input of cards, that you can balance different numbers and make different numbers worth more or less. So I might draw a card that's only worth 1 or 2 points at the end of the game, but it might have a really great ongoing ability throughout the game. So that can feel really good, even though I drew a lower value card. I've gone through 26 games here, maybe 27 if you count Bonanza, but there are many, many games that have elements like this of number parity. But I'd love to hear more. Hopefully this has given you some ideas if you're looking for ways in your game to value numbers in different ways and offer kind of circumstantial benefits between different numbers, especially if they're a random element. I left some games off this list that don't really have a random element to this. But yeah, let me know your examples in the comments below if you can think of some favorite ways or some things that you're going through in your game design right now. Thanks.